position here?
I'm Matt Kavanaugh. I'm the U.S. Advocacy Director for Health Gap.
Now, there's been a call by BRIC, and it's kind of been long-standing for quite some time, to reform the Bretton Woods system, mainly, of course, the IMF and the World Bank. Is that plausible, given a lot of the Western nations are pretty dominant in the decisions that are made here?
You know, I think it is plausible. I think the question is, how much political will is there really going to be? You know, you hear real substantive things coming out of the UK, coming out of a couple other places, but then you also hear Wall Street saying, we want exactly what's going on right now, that's what benefits us. So the question for us is, are we going to be able to seize the opportunity that is the financial crisis to actually make the reforms that would be needed? The thing that we're out here for is the financial transaction tax, or the financial speculation tax. It's been around for quite some time, and the reason why it's been around is that it's the simplest idea, right? You do less than 1/4% tax. When I go out to the grocery store, I don't have such tax, right? I have such tax all the time, whereas the financial institutions don't have to deal with that. That would be one step toward it. The IMF, it's not their job, it's the G20's job inside. Those are the kinds of reforms that would start talking about what a just global financial system looks like, and the IMF being pushed to get behind such things would be really transformative.
So are you thinking now that the G20 are meeting, and we've had phrases thrown around about 3% voting to developing nations, what do you think will come out of the G20's meeting right now that could lean toward this mandate change?
I think the biggest question that they're faced with right now is, how are they going to address the impact of the financial crisis? What they're saying is that they're going to figure out a plan to address that. But our question is, are you, much more than who votes, are you going to address the full impact of the financial crisis, right? It was a handful of banks, like 11, in the United States and in the other financial capitals of the world, that actually did the things that resulted in the financial crisis. And yet, around the world, those who were impacted are the poor, whether it's in the United States or the poor around the world. So our question is, are they going to actually think about a way to address the entire financial crisis, or are they just going to figure out how to get a little bit of the money back from the banks that they bailed out, but never actually address the financial crisis? That's the question that, for me, will determine whether or not this is a meeting and an institution that's based in justice and is based in the idea of real impact globally. Because it doesn't matter who votes, if they're not going to respond to the impact of the financial crisis around the world and on real people, like who are losing their jobs and their homes, then it doesn't matter who's voting. That's not the real question. The question is, what are they going to stand for?
Now, what's the problem with the World Bank and the IMF right now?
So the IMF has been historically, one of those that stands right in the way of anything that looks like justice, right? And so they just issued a report, and one of the things that they found in that report is that a financial transaction tax is completely possible, but they don't recommend it, which is yet again an example of the IMF standing on behalf of the banks and against the people and against the planet. That's exactly what we don't want to see, right? But they've admitted it's totally possible. So the question is just one of politics, right? We say, fine, the IMF has told you it's possible, now it's a political decision, not a decision for the IMF to make.
And are you thinking that they might, this 3% voting, whatever they're trying to do with it, I mean, is that going to be practical in making serious decisions about emerging economies and developing economies?
I think so long as the wealthy nations continue to dominate these institutions, 3% isn't going to matter one way or the other. We need a truly global shift in power, so that it's not even just the G20 that actually hold all the power, but even within the G20 we know that it's only a few economies that still hold all the power. A true institution, more like the United Nations, where people actually have voting power, that had real power, that would be much more like a global financial institution that makes sense. We work with people living with AIDS around the world, and we see that when the global fund and things like that are governed democratically, where everyone who has a stake has a role there, we see huge transformation happen. But instead, in the IMF and the World Bank, they're still not transparent. It doesn't matter whether they give 3% voting rights to somebody else if they're not transparent and they're not actually taking people's needs into account.
Good stuff. Thank you so much.